right, welcome to the show. I'm Mike.
I'm Maggie.
We're Friends on Fire, and we're on a mission to get friends to talk about money.
Awesome. So, Mike, what have you been up to lately?
Well, I drove over here, which is much longer than my normal commute, and
it took you like 14 minutes to get over here.
It took me 22 minutes.
Wow.
Which is about 10 times longer than my normal commute. Here's the question I have every time I get on the highway. How much vibration in your car is normal?
What year was your car made?
2003.
That's why you have vibration in your car. I believe my car is a 2016. There's no vibration happening in my car, so I'm not sure how much is normal, but I imagine there's a lot of vibration going on in a 2003 Ford Explorer.
Yeah, it's a real beauty of a car. It's not a comfortable ride.
That's funny. Well, thanks for making the 22-minute shaking ride over here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think my fillings came loose, though.
I want to share some positive news. On our last podcast, or one of our more recent podcasts, I shared a story of me having a pretty terrible fall while running. Today, earlier this morning, I went for a run and I ran again past the scene of where the accident was, just to remind myself that I can run without tripping. So I ran back over the curb that I tripped on last week.
Did you have any PTSD as you ran by that place?
No, but I did try to videotape it just to show like how easy it would be for someone to trip so I could show you. But then when I got home, I realized I wasn't actually recording and I just took a photo.
That sounds like a very Maggie thing to do.
I guess so. Had a lovely run though, so it's always a nice way to start the day, especially on a weekend. I honestly spent most of my morning prepping our podcast studio. You can't see me, but I've got air quotes right now. And I call it studio because we've kind of set up a sort of studio in one of my kids' old bedrooms downstairs.
And it's super pink. Every single wall is pink.
Well, if you turn around, it's purple, actually. 2 of the walls are purple and 2 of the walls are pink.
Oh, that makes it worse.
All 3 of my kids now sleep in one room because they really like to be close together and they don't like to sleep alone. So we have this room that we like decked out for them down here, for 2 of them down here, and no one sleeps in it now. And so we have this room that's pink that by the time anybody wants to come back to, they probably won't want these colors. I told Mike once we get to 1,000 listeners, I will repaint this room so that he doesn't have to look at this pink. It's like bubblegum pink, so it's a rough shade of pink.
And there's kids' artwork everywhere. It's actually quite soothing to be in.
Yeah. We both have all girls with our kids, and so you're used to this around your house, I'm sure.
I am, although the quality of your artwork's a little bit better than mine.
Just because they're older. You'll get there soon, don't worry. I think we should share a quick word from our sponsors.
Okay.
Oh, I keep forgetting we don't actually have any sponsors, so let's just keep going and jump over to our main topic today. So today we want to talk all about the FIRE movement.
Which is really the basis for this show.
Yeah. So what is FIRE, Mike?
FIRE is financial independence, retire early, and it's a popular movement that's gained a lot of traction in the past 10 years for people who kind of want to give it all up and stop working and find their passions.
We should note that though we talk a lot about FIRE and we kind of use that term because it is a term or an acronym that's getting a lot of traction, a lot of this is really just around personal finance and finding happiness and how you live your life. So we're going to talk about a lot of different topics related to that, but we wanted to really start with just the idea of introducing FIRE. And one of the main kind of premises. Premi? I know Prius is Prii if you have lots of them. We have 2 Prii. So premises?
One of the premises.
It doesn't sound right, but let's keep going.
Yeah.
Of FIRE is spending less.
We thought it'd be good to kind of give an introduction to FIRE because that's what we chose for our name. And although we're not talking about specifically retiring early in all these episodes, like it's sort of an umbrella and a movement that encapsulates a lot of different things.
Yeah. My favorite part of FIRE is the FI part, the financial independence.
Mm-hmm.
I think the retiring early is a nice to have. And I think people think retiring early means not working anymore, not doing anything. I think it's just having the freedom to do whatever you want, which is how I think of the second half of FIRE.
Yeah, and I think sometimes fire gets kind of maybe a bad rap or confusing rap because when you read articles online or you see stories on the news about it, it's always about like some 30-year-old person without any kids who quit his job and now lives in a van. And those are kind of the extreme examples of fire. And that's not really what we're focusing on. And it's really not what's appealing or achievable for most people, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I often watch a lot of those shows. I'm like obsessed with tiny house videos on YouTube. And people in those, as much as I admire them and want their lifestyle, our lifestyles are very different. And, we've got young kids. Not that we couldn't be on the road, but like I actually enjoy like living in a house and living in a neighborhood and being able to walk my kids to school. And so I don't know what my point is, honestly. But just the idea that we hope people realize we are just regular people with families and children and living in regular neighborhoods in a, American city. We have goals and dreams to not be tied to having a certain type of job to maintain a certain type of lifestyle. And I think we also are this is one of the ways that we kind of initially, I think, became friends and bonded, is we have similar ideals or philosophies on like what makes us happy. And we both realize that, consumerism and stuff and a certain like driving a fancy car or whatever it might be, that's not what actually makes me happy day to day.
The first few episodes, I think it would be good to break down for people how we approach fire and think of the fire movement. And so we're going to break this up into 3 different parts. First is spending less, which is kind of self-explanatory, but there's a lot to unpack there. And that's really what makes the fire movement. Yeah. And then there's growing wealth. So what do you do with that savings once you have it? And then the last part is finding freedom, which is going to look different for everybody. And maybe for Maggie, it's living in a tiny house. Maybe for somebody, it's just not worrying about losing their job. The finding freedom part can mean anything for anybody. And that's the kind of cool part about the fire movement in my mind.
Yeah. So we're excited. Over the next 3 episodes after this, we will break down spending less, growing wealth, and finding freedom, which in our point of view are kind of the 3 core elements that we think of when we think of fire. But today we want to just kind of dig a little bit more into the concept of fire and our philosophies on fire. And I think one point that is key that we made briefly earlier, but just is the idea that a lot of people think this is about true retirement. So I think one of the things that I've noticed when I do talk about these topics with some friends who maybe aren't sort of as extreme in their views as I am, is they'll ask me questions like, what would you do if you retired early? Like, wouldn't you be bored? Wouldn't you? And I think what some people don't sort of get, and that I think is the way I think about fire, is not literally about me retiring and like not ever doing anything of value or interest or around my passions. It's just not wanting to be tied to a certain type of job to maintain a certain type of lifestyle. It would allow me the freedom, which we'll talk about, more, but just the freedom to do whatever I want and whatever makes me happy and sort of explore my passions more than I'm able to, quite honestly, in the type of job that I have today.
Having the means to be able to do that comes with a lot of complexity, but also a lot of opportunity. So like you have these sources of income, you have these tools available to you. There are certain ways that you can adjust your lifestyle to maintain your current level of happiness or even be happier, that doesn't break the bank, that allows you to save much more than you think you're capable of saving. And I think that's also what people don't understand. Like there's a different way to go about your normal life that doesn't involve spending 100% of your income.
Yes.
The podcast came up as an idea because, we enjoy talking about these subjects with each other, but there's also like significant improvement that can be made when you start talking about it with your friends who are going to understand and support and challenge you.
Yeah, I agree. I think I know I personally, you're already so good at certain things, Mike. I'm not sure if you would say you've gotten better since knowing me, but I will definitely.
I think I've actually gotten quite worse.
I can genuinely say I have gotten better and not just better as in like a financial number or something, which is also the case, but just better in terms of like validating my philosophies and what's important to me. And there's something about, we talked earlier on a previous episode about how this can feel sort of isolating at times, which is why we want to talk about it more, because there are just things where through talking to you about this, it's even opened up more conversations with my husband, because like I'll come home and talk to him about certain things that you and I have talked about, like his cell phone bill, which we'll get into later. And there's a lot that comes from talking about it and being vulnerable about it. And I completely agree with your initial point, which is you all get better by being open and honest and having these conversations about money. So on that point, let's sort of talk about one of the principles of FIRE, or I don't know if principles is the right word, but the idea of how much people think they need to actually get to a point where they've hit their FIRE goal, or the point where they're at, what they would consider financially independent.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of confusion comes in, because when you hear these stories on the news, they throw out numbers like this person saved $500,000 and retired at 30, and you're thinking, I spend $200,000 a year. Like, what is this person talking about? And so I think one of the easiest way to understand financial independence as communicated through blogs and videos in the news is the 4% rule.
So I think it would be really funny if you actually tried to get me off the cuff to explain the 4% rule. Instead, we're going to let you explain it, Mike. It'll be brief and accurate if you explain it. It will be long and inaccurate if I explain it. Go for it. Yeah. Mike, what's the 4% rule?
So the 4% rule is saying you take your assets and you withdraw 4% of them. That is your level of spending. And you can continue to withdraw that amount over time and have it last you for the rest of your life. So 4% would also mean 25 times your annual spending. And the idea is that as you withdraw 4% from your invested assets, it continues to grow over time and replenishes that with compounding interest and growth. And so you maintain your assets to a point where by the time you die, you've depleted all of it, but you've never run out of money.
Let me ask you one question that I've never quite understood about the 4% rule and the whole thing of having 25 times your annual spending in order to get to a place of financial independence. I forgot the question, but hold on. It's going to come back to me.
Oh, it's going to be a long episode, Maggie.
It was a really good... So, okay. My question. They say to include your house, like real estate. So, for example, my house is paid off, and that's what I include as part of my net worth. But I live in my house, and so I can't take... I guess in theory, I could do a reverse mortgage as I'm like on my deathbed. But why do people include their house in that? And what's sort of like your point of view on whether you do or don't include that in your number?
I think people include that in their net worth number, but not necessarily in their 4% rule number.
Oh, okay.
Unless they're planning on selling their house at some point. But the idea is that you withdraw 4% and the entire balance of whatever the total, the 100% continues to grow. And so in theory, your house grows, but unless you're going to sell it, you can't
realize that growth.
You can't realize that.
I've always been curious about that piece.
So for many people, the 4% rule is kind of impractical because it means that all of your assets are basically liquid and invested and available to you.
Yeah.
But in most cases, you have a 401k you can't touch until you're 59 and a half. You have a house, you have a car, you have all these other things that are sitting out there and they have value and they're growing, but you can't withdraw them now.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a reason why people dismiss it and don't bother like thinking about it or investing in it because it just seems so impractical.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say I dismiss it, but I will say I agree that I believe that the 4% rule and that the 25 times math, for me, it's not enough. I think it's overly aggressive in terms of just again, like everything would need to, sort of the stars would need to perfectly align. You never have an emergency. You never have a big health scare or whatever. And so I personally don't subscribe to that. I'm not exactly sure what my exact rule is because I've not thought about it, but I do know that the amount I consider sort of satisfactory to get to a financial independence, retire early kind of goal point is significantly higher than some of those estimates. But that's also because I am overly conservative in general. Like I want to have like twice that goal and then I'll feel good. 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 And then I'll feel good
Yeah. And being financially independent also, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to cut your income down to zero. It gives you the opportunity to say, I'm not really worried about losing my job, or I can go take a 6-month or a 12-month sabbatical, or I could go, work in the paint department at Home Depot. And
I want to go work
really
at
happy.
Trader Joe's.
I want to go work at Home Depot and like mix paint.
I've worked at Home Depot and mixed paint.
Yeah, but you worked in the corporate office at Home Depot.
No. Do you not know this about me?
No, I didn't know this.
I worked in the corporate office at Home Depot, but I was in a 2-year leadership program called Business Leadership Program. And we had to do 4 6-month rotations around the company, 3 of them at the corporate office, 1 of them as an assistant store manager. And don't get, swayed by the term assistant store manager. It was not glamorous. I literally mixed paint in the paint department. I avoided the electrical aisle at all costs because I didn't ever want a customer to ask me anything about anything electrical. But I mixed paint. That was my favorite department. But I worked like full time, like 40, 50 hours a week, like in a store in Roswell. It was actually the first Home Depot ever in Atlanta, I think is the store I worked at. It was like store 101 or one of the first stores.
I would definitely go work at Home Depot. Everybody's so super funny. Happy. They want to help you with your DIY projects. I think it's a great environment.
Yeah.
I was there this morning, actually. I bought a rake.
Nice. I have an extra rake in my carport you could have taken.
Oh, you're giving it away? My
lawn guy left it one day and I told him and he was like, oh, it's fine. Keep it. And I was like, really? Don't you want your rake back?
You don't need it?
Well, I have 2 rakes.
Yeah, but
I do have 3 kids. So the other day I had 2 kids out there raking, which was nice. Double the work.
You need to be careful about telling me to take stuff because I will take it.
Never mind, actually. My kids really enjoyed raking the other day, so I'm going to keep that rake for now. But someday I'll gift you a rake, Mike.
No, okay. I just bought 2 new rakes. I don't need it.
Why'd you get 2? 1 for each of your kids?
No, 1 for me and 1 for my wife. So we can do it together.
Oh, that's cute. That's so cute.
Yeah,
is that like your
couples activity?
Is that like your date night? You're like, hey, Britta, you want to go outside and rake?
Yeah, for the
most part. Maybe we'll have a glass of wine in between stuffing bags full of leaves. I love it. Okay. We should tell the story. Can I tell the story real quick about when I asked you about splurging? Okay, so the other day we were talking about splurging. We're going to get back on topic in a second, but we were talking about splurging and I said, tell me something you've splurged on, Mike, because I splurge on stuff all the time. Like I'm very frugal. We'll talk more about this, but I also I've got a nice history of splurging on like things that matter to me. And so I'm asking Mike, I'm like, do you even know what splurging is? Like he doesn't really get it. And I'm like, tell me about a time that you splurged. And he was like, what'd you say? You were like, sometimes during this time of year, Starbucks puts out a special edition of like
Thanksgiving blend coffee.
Thanksgiving blend coffee. And it's like $15 a bag. And so he's like, I'll pick up my wife a copy, or I'll pick up a bag of that for my wife and like surprise her. And he was like, that's splurging, right? And I was like, no, Mike, that's grocery shopping. That's just, you needed some coffee and you bought some Starbucks coffee. So we'll talk more about how Mike does not know what splurging means.
Yeah, this has been my lifestyle for so long. I cannot bring myself to do anything different.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Okay, so back to the topic. One of the things that Mike was saying, just in terms of the 4% rule and the idea of 25 times your annual spending, I think one of the basics is really understanding your annual spending. And so we'll talk about that more in our next episode on saving more, because you really need to understand where you're at. And I think that is one of the kind of basic foundations of FIRE. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the things that we really bonded over is like a difference in approach to how we handle this first part of managing money. Because I work in corporate finance, and so I have a very technical, methodical, and meticulous approach to tracking and managing everything I do. And that was new for you.
Yeah. I had off and on tracked things over the years, but very intermittently and just very intermittently.
But you have also a very different approach that is new for me. It's like you are much more of a minimalist. And so you're focused on quality over quantity, and you have kind of a different philosophy about all of this, which is very different than what I do. I am strictly cost control.
I would say cost control is very similar to minimalism because I just don't walk in certain stores. So you were telling a story about your wife going to the Dollar Tree and spending $34 or something. But she was like joking, but I got 34 items, so it was great. But just as an example, I would never walk into the Dollar Tree. Like, I will barely walk into Target with my kids because they are just constantly asking for crap and I don't want to deal with it. And it's hard for me as a grown adult to walk through Target and not buy stuff that I don't need. So we'll get into that more. But you're right. I certainly do have a growing trend over the years of just wanting and needing less stuff and realizing that I'm actually happier with the less I have, even though many people seem to get caught in this trap that they believe happiness is tied to having more stuff, nicer things, more stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is an opportunity for me personally because, I mean, I'm pretty good about it. I buy very few things, but not nearly at the level you do. And so the cost control and monitoring expenses, like I got that down, but really being mindful about the volume of items I'm buying, I think is where I can improve.
Yeah, true. Okay, so we mentioned that we will talk about the sort of three foundations that we believe are crucial to the idea of FIRE, which is around spending less, growing wealth, and finding freedom. So we will cover those in the next 3 episodes. But I think the point we want to kind of leave on is just the idea and the value of talking about this topic with friends, which is it's why this is called Friends on Fire. It's why we're doing this. It's quite honestly why we're having a lot of fun doing this also. Mike's smiling, so you can't realize, but he is having a lot of fun doing this.
I'm having a great time.
And just, we really want to talk, and we are passionate about the idea of motivating more people to have honest and vulnerable discussions about money. And like we said earlier, I will admit I have gotten significantly better since I have been having these conversations with Mike. And I'm not better as in like I'm pinching pennies and I'm like giving up anything in my life. I'm better. I'm happier. I'm saving more. I'm closer to the goals that I want in life, and I'm happier. And I think that's the purpose of this and kind of why we want to talk about this more. Before we wrap up, we're going to finish these episodes with something that I call Mike's Minute on the Mic. And this is where I get to ask Mike one surprise question, and he has only 60 seconds to answer it.
And I'm usually a pretty concise speaker, so I'm hoping I can do this.
There's a reason you get the minute on the mic, because I couldn't answer anything in 1 minute. So I'm getting my stopwatch ready.
I just got a little nervous.
Yeah, you have no idea what the questions are. I've been prepping these. Okay, Mike, what is one financial decision that you have regretted in your life?
Ooh, actually, that's an easy one. So a few years after the recession, there was like a period of a few months of like extreme volatility in the market. And I started gambling. So I was doing these leveraged ETFs. So leverage.
I don't even know what that is.
So maybe we'll get into that different episode. But basically you get like 3x the return up or down of wherever this goes. And so I started investing in these and just had no idea what I was buying, had no understanding of like the risk and what I was hoping to achieve. I was really just trying to play the swings. Ended up losing a lot of money. At the time, it felt like
what was a lot of money? Can you tell us?
I think I lost like $5,000.
Okay, that's
so it's not
money. That would be how much money now?
It's felt like a lot of money, and it felt really stupid. And so that is the one regret. I would not have played around with these leveraged ETFs.
Okay, first off, that was 50 seconds. And I interjected multiple times. And the difficult thing for Mike's minute on the mic is actually going to be me not talking for 60 seconds, as I've discovered on this one. So congratulations. Well done getting it in under 60 seconds and with me interjecting also. Okay, so we are going to wrap up this episode with a couple of quick closing items. So as always, please give us a call at 404-981-3370 and leave us a question, comment, or a tip, and we will play it on the air. And then also, please, can you throw a please in there, Mike?
Please
leave us a review on iTunes or whatever tool you are listening to this podcast on. It really helps other friends find our podcast when you leave us a review, and we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the next few episodes as we break down these 3 pillars of how we see FIRE. But definitely we want to hear from you and make these shows relevant. So please drop us a line or shoot us a note, and we'll bring your topics into the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye.